Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mark Gabberty, and this is the podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking for the breakthrough for their businesses. One of the core elements of any successful content brand is boosting conversions. Every product creator wants to double their sales page conversion rates and landing page conversion rates. A critical piece to doing that is writing great copy, and that will be the focus of this episode. Today's guest is an online copywriter who specializes in boosting conversions for online entrepreneurs and other people who are doing great things. She also writes epic SEO-focused show notes for podcasters over at shownotesmadeeasy.com. Today's guest for episode 115 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Lara Loest. Lara, it was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
And I really do look forward to diving into this conversation. But before we do, I'd love to get some backstory. So why exactly did you become a copywriter?
I love to write, and I have loved to write since I was a teenager. It's a creative outlet for me. So copywriting was a great way to honestly make money doing that. And be able to work from home or work from anywhere, really, and really be my own boss and have, control over my schedule and my income and all of those great things.
I love the similarities there because I also do love writing content myself, and it's such a great creative, you get to explore your creativity as you write that content. So I really love the idea of starting young. I feel like more people should be starting earlier. And even if you're not a teen or anything like that, like if you have a dream, I do recommend that you definitely go for it. But for copywriting specifically, as I mentioned earlier, people do want to get those high conversion rates. So what do you see as some of the elements that these high converting sales pages tend to have in common?
So I think the biggest thing is really they know their audience. They know what their pain points are. They know how to solve those pain points, and they know how to connect with their audience. When you know those things, it's just a matter of finding the right people and sharing your message.
And I do agree that, it's totally based on that message point, because if you attract one audience, have a different message, then that's going to be a really big problem for your copy. But how can we attract the right people to our copy? Like, we have the message, but how do we get the people who are going to be receptive to that message?
Well, I think you have to know what it is that the problem that you're solving. So what are the pain points that your product or your service provides for people? And when you know that, that'll help you find people a little bit easier. So you'll know if you should be, I'm trying to think of an example and I'm kind of blanking, but there are different people who are going to be found in Facebook groups rather than people who will be found on Pinterest. So I think once you know exactly what it is that you're providing for people, and the solutions that you're giving them and what it is that you're doing that makes their lives better, then you're going to be able to find those people easier and attract them easier.
And you mentioned focusing on problems and pain points. And I'm wondering, how exactly do we figure out what people are having problems with? Because I feel like it's tempting to just guess about what people are having problems with, but how can we figure out on a deeper level?
Well, you really need to talk to people, whether that is actually picking up the phone and having conversations with them, literally on the phone or on Skype, or you can also set up an online survey and send people through that and just get in their own words what it is that they're struggling with. And very often by doing that, you will find out, what their pain points are exactly in their own words. And that's perfect because you can use that in your copy. So it's really a win-win when you do that.
And how do you recommend positioning your copy as the solution to those pain points? Because I see the problem, I have to be the solution, but how exactly do you approach that? Do you use a lot of stories? I see that's very common, but what else can we do to let people know that, hey, we're the solution here?
Well, again, when you're talking to people, they're going to tell you what they want to hear from you. So I mean, literally, you get surveys and you write down or record your conversations with people, and you take their answers and you use that in your copy verbatim, because that's how people trust you. That's how people understand that the position you've taken in the marketplace is as an expert and someone who can solve their problems. So I think that's incredibly important, that you just really know how to listen to people and how to put that in your copy. So, like you said, stories are very common because stories work. I mean, we as a species, we have told stories, throughout our existence. So stories are a great way to connect with people, and you can also weave in the the answers that people have given you throughout your copy as you tell a story.
And stories are definitely, I mean, we've been telling stories for millennia, like countless generations. Like stories have been around for a very long time, and they're very important in our copy. And one thing I've heard about in copywriting is that bullet points tend to work really well. And something like adding bullet points, it's like you're not changing the text within the copy, but you're making changes in the way that it appears to make it higher converting. So bullet points, for instance, make it easier for people to read through the main points. And I'm wondering if there's anything we could do in addition to bullet points once we've written the copy to tweak it so that it's able to convert better.
Well, I think making your copy easy to read is really important, which is why bullets are really valuable, as are subheads, and adding images and just breaking up that copy so that it's really easy for your audience's eyes to read. I had heard somewhere, and I believe this actually may have been from AWAI, from one of their copywriting courses, that the human eye, once a paragraph or a chunk of text is longer than 6 lines, the human eye just kind of glazes over and doesn't really process everything that's there. So keeping your copy short and sweet is important. Just keeping those, obviously, if you have a long form sales copy, you can't keep it short and sweet, but keeping the actual paragraphs and the chunks of text, keeping those short is an easy way to up your conversions.
And you mentioned something very distinctive about copy. Like it can be short to the eye, like for each paragraph, but you do have these long form sales letters and all this like copy that could, like if you put it all into a document, could take up dozens of pages. What's the work ethic you use to create that copy from start to finish?
Well, everyone has a different process for it. If you ask 12 copywriters, you probably get 12 different processes. So it is about finding out what works best for you. For me, I rely a lot on my unconscious, my intuition, whatever you want to call it. So I like to gather as much data as I can and sort of take that in and just let my brain process it and play with it. And then I'll come up with an angle or two or more. And again, I'll just let all of that sort of simmer. And then I will sit down and, bang out a chunk here, probably over a period of a few days. But I do write pretty prolifically, so I'm probably a bit faster than the average person. So give yourself a good chunk of time to write lengthy copy. And just let your brain take over and let it guide you. And you can always, I also think it's very important to just once you have a draft done or once you have a chunk of the copy done, walk away from it, preferably overnight if you can. But if you're on a time crunch, then just walk away for 30 minutes, go for a walk, go outside and listen to some music, do something and get your brain completely on a different subject, on a different wavelength. And then come back to it with new, fresh eyes and see if there's anything you want to change or if it still really works for you. I think that's a key component of that process. And like I said, giving yourself enough time so that you can do that is really important. Once I have a full draft done, I do need to walk away from it for at least a day, preferably over the weekend, and then come back and revisit it. Sometimes I'll read it out loud as well to see if it's conversational. That's also really key, is to make your copy conversational, because imagine that you are talking to just one person and you're having a conversation with them. That's going to create a bond and a rapport and definitely increase your sales. Did that help answer your question?
Yes, and you've mentioned a lot of points that I would like to expand on. One of them, like, it's very fascinating that you unplug from the copy so that you're able to review it with a fresh set of eyes. I feel like not enough people are doing that with their content. Not just taking the time to look it over, but also taking that time to unplug, because, again, unplugging does give you that fresh set of eyes. But you're also mentioning how you are able to type faster than most people. And I know that's from writing all the show notes over at shownotesmadeeasy.com for all of the other podcasters. But are there any ways that we can speed up our writing? Because I feel like people see the benefit of going from typing for 40 words per minute to typing 60 words per minute. Is there anything we could do other than just practicing and writing every day? Like, I know that's really important, but are there any other ways that we can boost our word count per minute?
I'm not actually sure. I've been, like I said, I've been writing since I was a teenager and typing since I was a teenager. So I'm not going to tell everybody how old I am, but it's a long time. So that's really how I've gotten fast at it. I do think it is practice, and perhaps you need to get a more aerodynamic, that's not the word I want, and more, ergodynamic, just a different keyboard that works better for you. That might help. Those are really the only things I can think of, honestly.
And I mean, I love the idea how practice is the main focus, and like, obviously keyboard and things like that are also important, but it definitely comes down to practicing. And I mean, you've practiced like for quite a while, like ever since you were a teen, you've been typing for like a very long time. So it does come easier when you do practice. I feel like that's with any type of goal that we pursue. And as we're pursuing a goal, some of us achieve them, some of us we may not achieve it the first time. We may face a setback, but on our journeys, not everyone is unlocking their full potential. And I'm wondering, what do you believe holds most people back from reaching their full potential?
That's a really good question. And it probably varies from person to person, but I think by and large, people are just waking up to the fact that failure is not the end. Like, failure is just, I'm paraphrasing a quote, but failure is just your opportunity to start again with more wisdom, with more knowledge of what doesn't work, so you can find what does actually work. So I think it's incredibly important to keep trying and learn as you go, and to understand that failure really is part of your process. Because if you don't fail, you're not going to succeed. Failure is simply part of life.
Lara, thank you for sharing with us how I can help unlock that potential, and failure being like something that we definitely have to face along our journeys. And another thing that we have to face along our journeys, and failure is connected with this, is some of the challenges that we have to face. And with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could share with us one of the big challenges that you face in your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
Another good question. I mean, there's lots. So, when I first started Show Notes Made Easy, it really fell into my lap. There was someone I knew personally at the time who had started a podcast, and he needed help with the show notes. So I offered to help. And that helping him led to meeting and helping other podcasters. So it really, in the span of probably 9 months, I went from not having a business to having a full working, self-employed, steady stream of income, and being at a point where I needed to figure out how I could make it stable, but also expand while still providing the same level of service. So something that I failed at terribly was hiring people to help me and training other writers to write show notes. I mean, I've really struggled with that for several months, actually. And it was because I didn't have a process mapped out thoroughly. So I took the opportunity to look at what I was trying to accomplish and what I was actually getting as a result, and to figure out, what was missing between those two things. And so having a very delineated process, a step-by-step process, basically, of training people on how to write show notes, that is what I was missing. And so I took some time and dug pretty deep. And I think this is important for people to understand, is that very often we're good at something and we think that everyone can do what we do, without actually understanding that we do have a talent, we do have a skill that we have developed. And so it was really hard for me to map out this process of writing show notes, because it came very naturally to me. So I had to take a step sort of outside of myself and think to myself, well, of course, who else do I think to? But, to think, what is it that I do from the moment that I start working with a client until I give them, the finished product? So I really sat down and wrote it out over a period of a couple of days. I wrote out how to do that. And I got much better results hiring people. And in fact, it also led to creating my course, the Show Notes Made Easy course. And so, if I had just given up the first or second or even third time that I had tried to hire someone, I would never have had my course. And I certainly would not have been able to, offer my services to additional podcast clients, because there's only so many show notes that I can do in a day. But with a team of writers and with a team of freelancers, I can branch out more, and I can do more good for more people.
A lot of juicy insights in that answer. I mean, I feel like we definitely take our knowledge for granted. Like when you hit like a really high level, even if you're at that high level, you could just think that, oh, this is natural. Like it was easy for me. So or like I've developed the skill. So like, it's like, I feel like even when we have these really good skills that people really want to learn more about or have, we could definitely take those for granted, or just assume that everyone knows them. So that's something that we should all remember. And I mean, delegating and building a team, I wonder if you could go a little more into detail about that whole process, because it's such an important part of building a successful business. The challenge is some people don't want to give up their control or have to worry about the salaries.
I think at some point, it's really, when you reach this place where you have more money than you have time, that's when it's your key to delegate. And so just start looking at simple things that you can do. I understand not wanting to give up control. And certainly when you have a creative service that you're offering, that adds an additional challenge, because it's creative. And so creativity to me is unique to each person. So for me to hand the reins over to someone else and have them produce what I consider to be quality show notes was, like I said, definitely a process. And it still is today. So it's really, when you do have more money than you have time, that's when it's time to start delegating. And just think about, I think Chris Ducker has this, it might be in his book, his first book. He has you map out 3 different columns. And in each column, like the first column, you write out things that you hate doing. And then in the next column, you write out things that you like to do, but you don't need to do. And then you write another column for things that only you can do. So if you can sit down, and maybe you have to do it over the course of a week, but write down something in each column, and then you can start looking at which of those things, obviously in column 1 or column 2, that you can delegate to other people. I think that's a good place to start.
Lara, thank you for sharing us those really great insights. And you did mention books, which that did trigger my bookworm. So One of the questions I love asking people is for some of their book recommendations. So, what are three great books that you believe would have a big impact on us going forward?
Oh, I love books too. So I have loads and loads that I've loved over the years. But I think three of my favorites are The Alchemist by Paulo. I can never pronounce his name, Paulo Coelho. It's just a beautiful, beautiful book. And it's a great reminder to just enjoy the journey as you go and to understand that your journey is yours. And so stop comparing yourself to other people and take one step at a time and follow your intuition on your own journey. Another book that I love is The Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. And for me, this was a book that really opened my eyes to being more present in my day-to-day life. And I think it's also a great reminder of just enjoying your journey and being wherever you are, no matter what it seems like. And I think the third book that I'm thinking of books that I read and reread. And so I make a point of rereading Think and Grow Rich pretty much every year. And certainly if I find myself in kind of a financial slump or even just a mental slump, I go back and reread that book. Which also makes me think of a fourth book that I reread along those lines. And it is, I can't remember the man's name who wrote it, but is Dollars Flow to Me Easily or something like that.
I love that title.
Yeah. And it's a really cool book. And it helped me look at my mindset and money very differently than anything else has. So I would really recommend that. And if I can, if I can remember the man's name, I can send that to you so you have a link to it.
And that book, the author's name, and everything else will be at the show notes at markgoberty.com/E115. And before we wrap up this episode, I've asked you a bunch of questions, but with that in mind, Lara, what is one question that you believe we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Another very good question. I would say something I like to ask myself. It's something you can ask yourself every day. I don't think I ask myself this every day, but certainly if I find myself stuck, I ask myself if what I'm working on, if it is getting me closer to where I want to be tomorrow. So if we can stop and take a moment and look at our day-to-day activities and focus on the things that are going to progress us, whether it's in our business or just as human beings, if we can look at our day-to-day and see what is helping us grow, I think that's a really important question to ask.
Lara, thank you for asking, and thank you for sharing with us that great question that we should be asking more often. A lot of great insights within that question and in this entire episode. And Breakthrough Success listeners, if you want to learn more, you can head over to shownotesmadeeasy.com, where you can learn about writing show notes and even see if Lara will help you. And you can even get a free show notes template if you email her at lara@shownotesmadeeasy.com. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show. I can't thank you enough for making time in your day to make this happen.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn more and get access to this free resource, visit markgoberty.com/